So you listened to it. What'd you think so far?
Okay, I thought that Monty's attorney, no, he didn't sound very opposing, which I know is like a superficial thing, but I
Yeah,
think that matters a lot to people.
sure.
He kind of had like a mush mouth, which I shouldn't say ever, but it was definitely, I don't know, they grilled him really hard, and the one thing that the guy on the first panelist, the guy on the left, he asked him a question that was like, why should it be in Minnesota instead of Colorado? Doesn't it sound like forum shopping? And you would
Yeah.
hope that when going to the appellate court, I think this is the appellate court, right? To do oral arguments, that you would have a canned response for that because that's like the question, like
Yeah.
that's the question that you're answering. And he kind of like froze in response to that question, like, "Whoa, that's bad," because that should be, that should be like the question you're prepared to answer in total. And then
Yes.
Randazza gets on, and he literally just like he walks up, he hits the dab, and then everyone claps for him. That's it. There's
Well,
no.
I mean, there's something to be said about having that experience, and but no, I think for Randazza, he shows up in places. This is not abnormal for him. He shows up. He's out of town talent. He comes in and has to knock it down. So he's very comfortable in his own skin. He's obviously older than the other guy, and that doing this a million times makes you better at it. Just being there, being in that situation, and I think they were not prepared, and ultimately, I think they were a little unprepared for the court being as receptive to the forum shopping argument. I don't think they were anticipating that to be as because they're even saying like, well, do you think we got it right? Like the Supreme Court of Colorado got this right.
Yeah,
And instead of just saying, well, a lot of times they'd say, well, hey, it's our law. That's what we're bound by. But I think they think there's something to be said there about, is this a forum shopping issue? Now, whether or not they decide on that, they were very interested in talking about it. And I don't think they were ready for that as in depth as it happened.
yeah, maybe not. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I was kind of my main gripe was just that he didn't have an answer for the why should it be in Minnesota, because I was under the assumption, and
Hmm.
I was shocked that he didn't bring this up, that you can always sue somebody in their state if they commit a crime on the internet or a tort on the internet,
Hmm.
and you can always sue them in their state. That's what I
Yeah.
for various reasons I've had pretty complicated discussions regarding jurisdiction recently, and
Hmm.
that's obviously one of your main considerations because I'm a Floridian living
Hmm.
place unknown. I have businesses in Wyoming and every other state in the U.S., and then the defendants are in two other states that I have no conduct in. So it's like, well, where do you
Yeah.
sue? And I had been informed that you can always sue in the state where the tort originated. So why it's a question that he can't sue in Minnesota, kind of eludes me to begin with.
Well, ultimately he can, and the one judge pointed out. He said, "I do federal court all the." He's like, "I was a federal court practitioner." He said, I could do what you're doing, but he said almost all the time we filed where the plaintiff lives, and if especially if that was where the tort occurred as well. So for Monty, he was in Colorado, and I know Monty's saying that he lives in Illinois right now, and I'm not getting into that, but wherever it is he wanted to live at or was living at is where typically you file the action. It's always easier. You take advantage of that. So, like for example, like Russell Greer, like why he filed in Utah versus Nevada makes no sense to me because he lives in Nevada. Why
He
not
was
file
living
there?
in that case has been going on for so long. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that he was living in Utah when it
Oh, he was
happened.
at the time.
Yeah,
Oh,
same as
see,
how Monty I think now lives in Illinois, but he was living in Colorado at the time. Which
yeah.
to me, I mean, it's like that should have been his go-to. Why file in Minnesota? Plaintiff is transient. He lives in a different state than
Hmm.
Colorado now. So if he remanded this back to Colorado, that wouldn't make any sense because he doesn't live there
Yeah.
anymore. His
Well,
is an online presence. He does
yeah.
all this stuff online. That's his business. So it doesn't make it makes
Yeah.
more sense to sue where the defendant's going to be than where the
Yeah.
plaintiff is.
Yeah. And I don't disagree with that, but a lot of times though, you file where, and yes, that's true, but I also think the court's saying, but yes, you could. They obviously were attuned to the idea that Minnesota's state law applications are far more favorable to Monty than even Colorado, or I don't know what Illinois are, but
I'm sure
or
they have
Illinois,
anti-SLAPP.
if you're French, if you'd like to call it that. That's something they're at least noticing. Now, whether or
Yeah,
not they,
I mean, I'm sure it was forum shopping. Like, to be
yeah,
real.
yeah. I mean, but like I told Monty, it's an issue of it's not wrong. It's a question of what's right or wrong. It's just a question of is this the right fit? Is this the best way to do it? When
Yeah.
when getting ready for the bar, there was this multiple choice part of it, and they would have questions, and you'd look at two answers, and they're both really good, but they'd say you have to pick the more correct answer. And I always hated that shit because if they're both right, they should work. But when it comes to the conflicts of law issue, in this case, it's not an issue of one's right or wrong. One of them is a little more correct than the other, and it's an issue of is it Minnesota, is it Colorado? So
Well,
they
my
both
question
work.
is, if they're going to send this back to district
Mhm.
court, they're sending it back to Minnesota district court to apply Colorado anti-SLAPP.
Yes,
That's insane. I
that
mean,
happens.
that should be your defense. That's insane.
Well,
Why the fuck would you do that?
well, I mean, Josh, like you and I can enter a contract, and we could say the forum of choice is Texas, and we'll be arguing Rhode Island law. You could do that, and it's utterly insane to do that, but you can agree to have that maybe be a term. You know, there's all kinds of ways you can agree to the choice of laws, the forum of laws, the proper forum to try a case in. So that's entirely it's
Yeah.
dumb, but you can do it. And
That is dumb because you're just complicating matters for absolutely everybody involved. Not a single person is spared misery in that case.
well, there's always reasons for it, though. I've seen that happen once or twice in stuff I've run across. There was a reason for it, and once the reason was explained to me, made some sense, but I still thought it was dumb as hell. And in this situation, even if Nick wins here, he could still lose because the court could say, okay, well, I'm going to apply it, and nope, it's still defamation, I think, per se, has been met. Go on a discovery.
Oh, that would be the funniest outcome. I always root for the funniest outcome. The funniest outcome is that he spends all this money on this appeal, asking novel questions of law to try and alley-oop some kind of weird precedent for Colorado law being applied in Minnesota, and then succeeds, and then it's applied, and the judge is still like, well, this is still defamation.
Yes. No, it can. That's the thing. Like, it's not a guarantee because even in Colorado, you say well, you don't. Just, it doesn't. People think you get to go anti-SLAPP and you drop the mic and that's it. You can still lose even with the protections provided by an anti-SLAPP statute.
It's just very scary because if you lose an
Yeah.
anti-SLAPP, then you owe fees, and that's unique. That's the reason why Vic Mignogna owes $500,000 now. It's because he lost against anti-SLAPP, which is it exists basically to scare people into not filing unless they, unless it's like a surefire victory, basically.
Where they've got the money they're willing to lose. So, and that's also the option there. But yeah, the other big part of anti-SLAPP is generally they're pretty robust and you can get away with a lot of things, but it's not bulletproof.
It depends on the state. I don't know. I'm not familiar with Colorado's, but for instance, I am familiar a little bit with Massachusetts. And Massachusetts has an anti-SLAPP law, but it's so weak. It basically doesn't exist. And the same is with Virginia. Virginia has anti-SLAPP, but Virginia's anti-SLAPP is so weak that it effectively does not exist. So there are anti-SLAPP. Texas is like an outlier. Like I think even because I had Hardin look into this. The Texas, because I asked him what really fucked up that case. So he looked into it for me just out of his own personal curiosity, his educational purposes, and he came to the conclusion that the Texas law was actually insane, and they changed it specifically because of this case. Like they made it less severe than it was when Vic filed.
Well, I mean, on the plus side, it served a public policy purpose. I
mean, how charitable.
I mean, it's like the epilogue. Like, sure, you may have lost, but it changed history forever.